I want to tell you about a man I created who was, in many ways, the most honest character I ever wrote. Not the most dramatic, not the most tortured, but the most honest. He was a man who had arrived at a conclusion that most people spend their entire lives carefully avoiding, and he had arrived at it not through weakness, but through a kind of brutal, clear-eyed logic he could not argue himself out of. The conclusion was this: nothing matters, not in a fashionable, artistic way, in a total, structural, irreversible way. He had looked at his life and at the world around him and found, at the center of both, a complete absence of meaning. He had studied, he had thought carefully and seriously about existence. But thinking seriously about the world, without love to anchor the thinking, leads a certain kind of mind to a certain inevitable destination, the conclusion that the whole enterprise is arbitrary and therefore pointless. He could not find a reason, a real and unassailable reason, why anything should matter, why this life rather than no life, why he should get up in the morning, speak to another person, or feel anything at all. The indifference crept in slowly and then became total. He stopped being moved, he stopped being interested. He watched other people living with what appeared to be genuine investment in their own existence, and felt something he could only describe as a cold, tired contempt, not because they were foolish, but because he believed he had seen through the performance and they had not. Most people who believe that nothing matters do not actually live as though nothing matters. They believe it intellectually and then continue caring about their dinner, their reputation, their small pleasures and grievances. This man had no such inconsistency. He believed nothing mattered, and he acted accordingly. And so one night, walking the dark streets of Petersburg with a revolver waiting for him at home, he made his decision. But before he reached his door, a small girl seized him by the sleeve. Cold, frightened, desperate, she pulled at him and begged for help. And he walked away from her. He was too consumed by his own grand despair to stop for something as small as a child in distress. He went home, sat in his chair, and fell asleep before he could act. And the dream that came to him in that chair is what I want to speak to you about. Because that dream is not merely a story. It is the most compressed and complete thing I ever wrote about what it actually means to be alive. In the dream, he found himself transported to another world, a world so full of warmth and human closeness that when I try to describe it, I find myself reaching for language I normally distrust. It was a paradise, not in the theological sense of reward and ritual, a paradise of simple, direct, unguarded human love. The people there loved each other without calculation, without fear, without the layers of self-protection that make love in this world so rare and so difficult. They were present to each other in a way that the ridiculous man had never been present to anyone, including himself. He lived among them and felt, for the first time in his remembered life, that his existence had weight, that it registered, that the space he occupied in the world was not empty, but filled with actual connection, actual consequence, actual meaning that did not dissolve under examination. And then, slowly, without intending to, he corrupted them, not through deliberate cruelty, simply by being there, by being himself, by bringing into their world the particular quality of consciousness he carried, the self-awareness, the habit of observing rather than participating, the capacity for irony that is also a capacity for detachment. He introduced the lie, not a specific lie, but the possibility of lying, the gap between what one appears to be and what one actually is. And once that gap appeared, it spread through the entire world like a disease, and the paradise came apart, and the people who had loved each other simply and directly began to love each other strategically and conditionally, and suffering entered, and shame, and the need for justice, because love was no longer sufficient. And eventually a world emerged that looked with terrible precision, exactly like this one. The ridiculous man woke from the dream utterly transformed, not comforted, not given a theological argument that resolved his despair into faith. transformed in the way that only direct experience can transform a person, the way that no amount of thinking about something can substitute for the actual encounter with it. He had felt in the dream what it was like to be fully present to another human being without the glass of analysis between himself and the experience. And having felt it, the emptiness simply ceased to function, not because it had been disproved by argument, because it had been replaced by something more real than any argument, the felt, unmediated reality of genuine contact with another person. This is what I believe most people die without ever truly having. Not connection in the general sense of having people around them, having relationships, going through the social motions that constitute what we agree to call a life. I mean the specific thing the ridiculous man found in his dream and spent the rest of his waking life trying to describe to people who told him he was mad. I mean the experience of being fully present, without reservation, without the protective distance of the person who is always slightly watching themselves live rather than actually living. The person who has not had this, and I believe most people have not had it, or have had it only in brief flashes they could not sustain, that person is alive in the biological sense and absent in the sense that matters. They are present in rooms, but not in moments. They move through their years, accumulating experiences without being genuinely changed by them, because being changed requires an openness that feels too much like vulnerability, and vulnerability feels too much like danger. The little girl in the street is the key to this entire story, and I placed her there deliberately. She was not an abstraction or a symbol to be analyzed. She was cold and frightened, and she reached for the hand of the one person near her who might have helped. And he walked away because his despair was too large and too important to be interrupted by something as immediate and as inconvenient as another person's need. This is what I am describing when I speak about the man who does not truly live. He is not evil. He is not cruel in any calculated sense. He is simply so fully occupied by his own inner world, his own conclusions, his own elaborate and very serious reasons for feeling nothing, that the actual world simply does not penetrate. The self becomes so consuming that there is no room left for anything outside it to be real. And this is the most common form of unlived life I know. It happens quietly. It happens over years. It happens especially to people of intelligence, because intelligence without love produces exactly this, a person who understands everything about life and participates in none of it, who has the most sophisticated possible reasons for keeping their distance, who mistakes the thought for the thing and the map for the territory. The ridiculousness of the ridiculous man was never that he was foolish. It was that he had all the intelligence in the world and had used it to build a wall between himself and the only things that actually matter. He found his way back not through argument, but through experience, through a dream that gave him what no philosophy could have given him, which was the felt reality of what it is like to be genuinely present to another human being. And the story does not end with him standing at a lectern delivering the truth he has discovered to grateful listeners. It ends with a gesture. He went back and found the little girl. That is all. After everything, the despair, the revolver, the dream, the paradise, the corruption, the awakening, what I chose to end the story with was a man turning around and going back to the child he had walked past. Because that turning around is, I believe, what living actually consists of. Not the grand transformation, not the moment of blinding revelation, the small, quiet, unglamorous decision to stop walking past what is real and in need and right in front of you, and to turn back toward it instead. Most men die without ever having made that turn. They live their entire lives within the glass of their own consciousness, watching the world rather than touching it, thinking about love rather than loving, understanding suffering from a careful distance rather than allowing it to move through them and change them. They die having been present in their own lives in only the most technical sense of the word. The ridiculous man was almost one of them. What saved him was not intelligence. He had always had that. What saved him was a dream that stripped the glass away, even briefly, and let him feel what it actually costs and what it actually means to be alive among other people who are also trying to be alive. The question the story leaves with you is not philosophical, it is practical. It is this: who is the child in the street that you are walking past? What is the thing that is cold and frightened and reaching for your hand that you are too consumed by your own serious and elaborate inner life to stop for? And is it too late to turn around? It is not too late. It is never too late until it is. And the ridiculous man, ridiculous to the end, went back anyway.